polled people under the age of 30, you would probably have a pretty comparable number of people who've seen Hamlet, a production of Hamlet, a stage production of Hamlet, to the number of people who have watched The Lion King. Sometimes you gotta hide the broccoli under the mashed potatoes. If you're gonna get people interested in this story at a younger age and get them used to hearing this tale, sometimes you gotta do something like that. You gotta make The Lion King.
Boy.
And you gotta make people see, like, oh, I understand this story. If you want to then, once someone has seen The Lion King, if you're trying to get a 5-year-old who has seen The Lion King to then relate and identify with Hamlet 5-10 years later, saying the words, you know The Lion King, right? There are a lot of the same things that are in this. Try to picture that when you're watching this and help you connect to these ideas. I think that is how I was able to connect to it.
Sure.
I think that is how a lot of
I
people
guess it comes down
connect
to
it.
experience, because for me, The Lion King actually made Hamlet harder to digest. Because for me, when I first read Hamlet when I was 11 or 12, the things that struck me about Hamlet were the personal things, were the solo, every soliloquy he has, the existential crisis. And for me, The Lion King was not about that. For me, The Lion King was about, do I follow duty, do I not?
Can I also
Hamlet's
say...
not a question of duty. Hamlet is absolutely not a question of duty. I think he thinks of Denmark as being secondary to the entire issue.
And we might cut this, but I just want to throw it out there. I saw Lion King in theaters, and then I read Hamlet later, and never, ever did I, relate the two, ever. I knew that they were supposed to be the same, but I knew that they were completely different.
Now, if we're getting into whether or not classical theater can be done in a smaller space or a black box, I think that the great thing about classical theater is that it can. The problem with a lot of modern theater, and specifically at this point in time, musicals in general, is that they can't. They write into these shows so many over-the-top technical specifications that it makes it difficult. It's not that it can't be done, but people expect a certain thing.
It makes it difficult. And
yeah.
just quickly before you go, Sarah, that we experienced that issue very recently when we produced Into the Woods in a minimalistic setting. There were people who were nervous about coming because they didn't know how we were going to be able to hold it off.
Well, how are you going to make this happen? How are you going to make this happen? That's not the point.
Yeah.
But then you see so many of these shows where you're supposed to be, like we were talking about doing Tommy as a show. And the thing is, when that show is done on a Broadway stage, when you have a full band on stage and you have pyro going and you have all this stuff, that's what people expect from a show like that. They expect it. And it doesn't mean you have to do it, but it makes it a lot harder to do and sell.
Sure.
Okay, Sarah, please.
I would find, and this is a specific example, and I understand that, but I would find Sunday in the Park with George more powerful in a black box.
And I think a lot of times it's done in a smaller.
But
It's
the
really
one that
not,
we know
Sarah,
is
actually not really very
Mandy
often at all.
Patinkin and Bernadette Peters. He's painting the painting while it's on the stage. He's doing it's a huge
Proscenium.
set.
Yeah.
It's
cardboard.
proscenium. And I feel like essentially that show is so much about the two characters that so much more could be imaginary.
Have you
so
agree
much
with you.
more
Have
could be
you
broken
seen
down.
the revival, the clips from the revival where
No.
it was digital?
I have not.
It really does sort of change the entire perspective of the story because everything's digitally projected. But I absolutely agree that Sunday in the Park with George is such an essential story about art and about the things that come out of George's head.
Mm-hmm.
And when I directed a scene from it in college, it was just this idea of adding small little elements as he created the world around him. But people don't expect that.
Yeah.
People expect, the sort of big proscenium style, here's how we create moment by moment the art.
Well, I think you can do these classical shows with huge budgets and big sets and all of that, and that's wonderful. People enjoy that. That'll be really good to the mentality and the expectations of modern audiences who expect production value. But you don't have to because the playwrights didn't have that, and so they didn't write it. So many plays now, like just if you read through a lot of scripts for modern plays, you'll see things that are supposed to happen that if you don't have money, you kind of have to figure out how you're going to make
But there's
this
some places where you
happen.
absolutely just can't. It's
Yeah.
it's not possible.
You look at it's
For
really difficult to do
instance-
Peter Pan if you don't have a flight rig.
Right. But also, for instance, Spamalot.
Yeah.
Or
Very
The
expensive for us.
producers.
the producers,
Yeah.
which the entire point of the producers is that they have a
It's
huge budget to
spectacle.
rely on.
Right.
But the point that I was going to make, oh god.
And a lot of that's
I don't remember
musicals. There are a lot of straight plays that you can still kind of get away with in single set black box.
it. Mhm.
I think there are a lot of, like, we could get away with doing something like Mousetrap in a single set black box. You
Sure.
could get away with it. You'd still want to
It'd be a
feel
little
like you're in a great
tricky,
big,
but
like,
you can do it.
But
Victorian.
the production value of Mousetrap, even if you're doing a full production, isn't that huge.
No.
Right, but there was a point in the development of 906's theater company where Sarah was at the table with me. I don't know what we were talking about necessarily, but she was talking about defining or cleaning up our mission statement a little bit because it's kind of vague at the moment. Talking about how we're not really interested in doing a show that you can't do in a black box, that you can't do in a minimalistic style, and I think that is
Yeah.
incredibly connected.
Yeah.
Is importantly connected to the idea of the playwright as the primary artist, because if
Yeah.
the play cannot stand up on its own 2 feet on the words alone, then we're not
Is it worth doing?
we're
If-
not
yeah.
interested in it.
If-
And that's
yeah.
the people in this
Not
room right
not
now.
worth doing, but
Right.
interested in doing it.
Right. And as an art, if the idea that if the play is secondary to, hey, look at those things that are happening on stage
You
that
know, look
require
at
a
the
lot of money to
helicopter
do.
that just came down. Look
Right.
at the barricade that was
Right.
just built.
Right.
Look at the pyro.
Look at the guy tap dancing on the ceiling. However,
Not that
However-
those things aren't phenomenal, but that's not what we're interested in doing.
Right.
And it comes down back to that idea of like, what is the naked essential truth of the play?
And I think that a lot of, getting back to the question, I think that a lot of classic plays allow you to get away with not having money to do them. Royalties aside, you can get away with doing a lot of these shows because they didn't have money to do all this stuff, and they didn't have the resources to do all this stuff. They obviously didn't have a projector where they could project.
and
You know,
the epitome of that is Greek tragedy, where everything happens off stage, and the stage is just there for people to talk about it. And from there, it just extrapolates out from like resources and
Yeah.
time, and now we can
So,
do whatever we want.
On the flip side, I think that you're going to have a mixed bag. You're going to have some people who relate super well to seeing Hamlet done in a black box theater where he's right there, you're connecting with him, and you're feeling that. You're going to get that audience, and that's going to be your super passionate audience that maybe is just experiencing this for the first time. You're going to get those audience members who are used to other things, are not interested in that, and want to see the big production value. They want to see the big thing, and that's what you're going to draw on those people. If you say, we have this huge budget, we put a castle on stage, he's up there doing all of this stuff, and those you're going to be bringing in different kinds of people, and they both work. They both work really well, but I think that it's different. It's just different. Is what it comes down to.
I'd see both, but I'd like the black box.
I would
more.
too. Personally, I would too. I think that that's so personal with all of us that we would connect to that. But I know that there are people out there who are going to want to see
Right.
a big production.
The only, and just before we get to your thing, Brian, for the people in the room, there's like it's kind of like a little code that when you go to see productions that are big and fancy and beautiful, but that don't really explore the essential truths behind the play, that don't really explore the naked truth, the naked story of the play, that don't put the play first, that the first thing you say about it is, well, the production values were really high.
Right.
It's this sort of in joke that like
Like Avatar.
here's something nice I
It's a
can
movie.
say about a play. The
They
production's
invested
values
in
were
it.
really high, but that the story, but what I'm implying when I say the production values were really high is that the story was put second or third or fourth or fifth that it didn't matter to me what was happening to the characters on stage so much as the shininess of what was in front of me.
Yep.
As opposed to something that we go see, and I know I've personally said this a few times, is it was a great show. It was a low production value, but like the production value was lower, the production cost was low.
Yeah.
But it was a great show, and that means like you're gonna go see something in a bar or in a Chicago storefront theater or
In a black box, in a college environment.
a great space, but a show that was technically beyond them. But they put it up anyway, and it was great, and
Yeah.
I'm recommending it. Like
Yeah.
it's the term production value has such a weight in how I describe so many things.
Right, that the actors were working so hard, but maybe the production values were lower.
Mhm.
And it's just about what is your personal preference, what are your personal priorities
Right,
for a
right.
theater.
That said, to see Les Mis and to see that barricade be built is this
It does have a power
thing.
Yeah,
if it's used correctly.
but Miss Saigon and the helicopter coming down,
You don't
like,
need it.
It just seemed like they were like, here's a helicopter coming down.
We're doing
I
this for the
saw-
sake of doing this.
To talk about two productions that I have personally seen, I saw Mary Poppins in New York on Broadway. Like in the first few years they were doing it, like still super big. And I saw it at Fireside in Wisconsin with Brian, and I really liked most productions. I have to say that I had more passion for the one I saw in Madison. Whether that was because I saw the actors doing it so truly and well, or whether there are a lot of factors, but I saw two productions that were complete as Mary Poppins. However, the stage version of Mary Poppins was developed to have the projector screen and the rigging and the huge sets, and to be able to see it without that, and it was still the story of Mary Poppins, was really exciting.
right, there's this trap that modern playwrights, especially musical theater modern playwrights, fall into.